written notes you'll keep. I mean, this one I actually laminated. It was so meaningful. Um, I was going through just some files at home as we've been having time to organize things, etc. And I literally found some handwritten notes from my grandfather to my grandmother when he was in the war, and that was just really kind of cool to kind of read through that stuff. So, um, all right, we've got Mother's Day coming up, so that's an easy one for people to like a written note. Hmm. Still not sure if we're live because it's freezing up on my end. So, um, all right, I can see maybe it is live now. I'm going to just start that part over because again, I'm not sure if anybody was seeing it. So, Friday, May 1st, welcome to it. Um, 87 degrees Saturday, so take advantage of that social distancing wise. It looks like some things are going to start opening up on Monday, so that will be interesting to see. I was talking with a client yesterday who has a couple of small businesses, and interesting enough, he doesn't have enough employees to open them because people are still concerned about being out and about, so that's probably realistic. So we'll see when things open. Are people running out there to go do that, or will it be a slower pace? I'm anticipating it be a slower pace. All right, so today's conversation, Lead Connect Grow, is about handwritten notes. And again, I was just kind of saying that interesting. Often we'll keep handwritten notes. This one's laminated, etc., because it was so meaningful. And I see people coming on now, so I guess I am live. All right, so I think Klaus and Natalie have both talked about some things about their family, so I'm going to kind of stay on that path as well. My mom's birthday was last week. She turned 79. She was 23 years old when I was born. I was the fifth child. So 23 years old, having five kids back in the 60s, etc. Can't imagine what it was like. I literally called her one day when we had our second child and said, I have a whole new level of respect for what you went through as a mom of five in a small town. Fortunately, the kids could walk to the grocery store and laundry to help with those things, etc. But talking to her about growing up, I mean, she was born in 1941, so in a war, and she had never heard any conversation with her parents talking about those type of things. My grandmother was born in 1902, so she went through World War One, World War Two, the Spanish flu back in 1917, 1918, and we never heard any conversation of grandma telling the stories of what it was like growing up as a child through all that. Um, Interesting that my grandmother was in a hospital twice in her life. My dad was a twin, and she went in the hospital for that. And which she broke her hip. So in a hospital twice in her life, she literally passed away in her sleep at the age of 92 on her sofa. What was interesting about that kind of ties into the handwritten notes, grandma kept a diary of who called, who wrote, or who came by and visited every day. So that's how meaningful it was to her. She had 8 children, 35 grandchildren, and I forget how many great grandchildren. But so we got to read through all that after she passed, and it was really, really neat to see and get to keep a lot of those things. But what's interesting is that nobody ever talked about those things. I've got a book from the town I grew up in. It's a history book from 1893 to 1976, and no mention of anything, the war, the Spanish flu, etc. So I think it's just people didn't talk about those type of things. Are we talking with our kids, our nieces, nephews, etc.? There was no social media back then. I was talking to my aunt in Michigan, my dad's twin, a couple of days ago, and she just thought it was interesting that it was never brought up. Just parents didn't talk about those type of things. She said we didn't have any kind of conversation. Now there's 8 kids, so maybe that was part of it. So I guess my encouragement for handwritten note is make it a meaningful note. And literally, if you want to write to grandkids, niece, nephew, because this time is going to pass, but hopefully it's not going to be forgotten of what it really was like, because the impact has obviously been huge. So I actually Googled what happened in 1917, 1918, because St. Louis is in the news about that. St. Louis apparently did a great job of shutting it down. As the flu was coming across the country, it started on the East Coast, and so there was some heads up for that. And it was interesting that it hit Jefferson Barracks, I think one of the first places. October of 2007, there's 2018. On October 5th, there was the first death. It looks like as I read through everything, and it was pretty much shut down schools, churches, sporting events, etc. 2 days later. Now about 6 weeks later, they lifted the ban. And then a few weeks later, they had the highest number of deaths in one day. So it really talked about just social distancing really worked back then. For some reason, Philadelphia had a parade and they had a big spike with thousands of deaths. So again, it was very interesting. So kind of share that conversation with whatever, again, friends, family, children, grandchildren, et cetera, because I just found it very interesting. We as a family last night sat and talked about it for a while, and we're just Googling the different things just to have that conversation. All right, so do the 2 handwritten notes, make them meaningful, and hopefully somebody will keep it for 50 years and look back and remember you fondly for having written that. It was just for me to read notes from my grandfather to my grandmother, talking about missing my dad because my grandfather was in the war. You just feel like you're stepping back in time and being a part of that. So take advantage of that. All right, just quickly, May 1st, it's Friday. I started pulling stats this morning, and the news really looks better than I was anticipating it to be. So I'll certainly get some more of that stuff out. But a quick read: St. Louis County, number of new listings was down 20%. I expected that it might have been bigger than that. The total number of active listings, I was expecting a bigger drop, and it was about 29%. So that was probably overall good news. Months of inventory is sitting at 2 months, so it shows the sales rate is still happening. Median price over last month was up 17%. Median pricing over last year was up 17%. That was really surprising. Sales are down about 19%, but it's the first of the month. It literally takes a few days for people to kind of get everything closed out in MLS. So I expect we'll see an improvement, probably give or take ending up about 15% down. So again, in light of everything that's going on, I feel like those numbers are okay. All right, so happy Friday. Enjoy the beautiful weather Saturday. Again, 87 degrees. I am grateful that my new air conditioner got put in yesterday, so it won't be 90 degrees in our house this weekend. Have a great weekend, folks, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.